Hey everybody, welcome to the church building. Today we are continuing our journey through the Bible, cover to cover, Genesis, could I say that any more weirdly? Genesis through Revelation. We're currently in Judges chapter 6. Again, this will be a low commentary read through, dialing it back a little bit. I just have a lot on my mind, and I'm not going to turn this into a therapy session. If you're hoping for that, you're not going to get it. I don't know, maybe you will. Chapter 6, the Israelites did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord gave them into the hand of Midian 7 years. The hand of Midian prevailed over Israel, and because of Midian, the Israelites provided for themselves hiding places in the mountains, caves, and strongholds. For whenever the Israelites put in seed, the Midianites and the Amalekites and the people of the east would come up against them. Whenever Israelites put in seed, I'm not sure what that means. We'll see. They would encamp against them and destroy the produce of the land. Okay, that must be it. As far as the neighborhood of Gaza, and leave no sustenance in Israel, and no sheep or ox or donkey, for they and their livestock would come up, and they would even bring their tents as thick as locusts. Neither they nor their camels could be counted. So they wasted the land as they came in. Thus Israel was greatly impoverished because of Midian, and the Israelites cried out to the Lord for help. When the Israelites cried to the Lord on account of the Midianites, the Lord sent a prophet to the Israelites, and he said to them, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, I led you up from Egypt and brought you out of the house of slavery, and I delivered you from the hand of the Egyptians, and from the hand of all who oppressed you, and drove them out before you, and gave you their land. And I said to you, I am the Lord your God. You shall not pay reverence to the gods of the Amorites in whose land you live. But you have not given heed to my voice." Now the angel of the Lord came and sat under the oak at Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abizrite, as his son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. The angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, "The Lord is with you, you mighty warrior." Gideon answered him, "But sir, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? And where are all his wonderful deeds that our ancestors recounted to us, saying, 'Did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt?' But now the Lord has cast us off and given us into the hand of Midian." Then the Lord turned to him and said, "Go in this might of yours and deliver Israel from the hand of Midian. I hereby commission you." He responded, "But sir, how can I deliver Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family." Verse 16. The Lord said to him, "But I will be with you, and you shall strike down the Midianites, every one of them." Then he said to him, "If now I have found favor with you, then show me a sign that it is you who speak with me. Do not depart from here until I come to you and bring out my present and set it before you." And he said, "I will stay until you return." So Gideon went into his house and prepared a kid and unleavened cakes from an ephah of flour. The meat he put in a basket, and the broth he put in a pot, and brought them to him under the oak and presented them. The angel of God said to him, "Take the meat and the unleavened cakes and put them on this rock, and pour out the broth." And he did so. Then the angel of the Lord reached out the tip of the staff that was in his hand and touched the meat and the unleavened cakes, and fire sprang up from the rock and consumed the meat and the unleavened cakes, and the angel of the Lord vanished from his sight. Then Gideon perceived that it was the angel of the Lord, and Gideon said, "Help me, Lord God, for I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face." But the Lord said to him, "Peace be to you, do not fear, you shall not die." Then Gideon built an altar there to the Lord and called it, "The Lord is Peace." To this day it still stands at Ophrah, which belongs to the Abiezrites. That night the Lord said to him, "Take your father's bull, the second bull 7 years old, and pull down the altar of Baal that belongs to your father, and cut down the sacred pole that is beside it. And build an altar to the Lord your God on the top of the stronghold here in proper order. Then take the second bull and offer it as a burnt offering with the wood of the sacred pole that you shall cut down." So Gideon took 10 of his servants and did as the Lord had told him. But because he was too afraid of his family and the townspeople to do it by day, he did it by night. Verse 28. When the townspeople rose early in the morning, the altar of Baal was broken down, and the sacred pole beside it was cut down, and the second bull was offered on the altar that had been built. So they said to one another, "Who has done this?" After searching and inquiring, they were told, "Gideon, son of Joash, did it." Then the townspeople said to Joash, "Bring out your son so that he may die, for he has pulled down the altar of Baal and cut down the sacred pole beside it." But Joash said to all who were arrayed against him, "Will you contend for Baal, or will you defend his cause? Whoever contends for him shall be put to death by morning. If he is a god, let him contend for himself, because his altar has been pulled down." Therefore on that day Gideon was called Jerubbaal. That is to say, "Let Baal contend against him, because he pulled down his altar." Then all the Midianites and the Amalekites and the people of the east came together, and crossing the Jordan they encamped in the valley of Jezreel. But the Spirit of the Lord took possession of Gideon, and he sounded the trumpet, and the Abiezrites were called out to follow him. He sent messengers throughout all Manasseh, and they too were called out to follow him. He also sent messengers to Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, and they went up to meet him. Then Gideon said to God, "In order to see whether you will deliver Israel by my hand, as you have said, I'm going to lay a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. If there is dew on the fleece alone, and it is dry on all the ground, then I shall know that you will deliver Israel by my hand, as you have said." And it was so. When he rose early next morning and squeezed the fleece, he wrung enough dew from the fleece to fill a bowl with water. Then Gideon said to God, "Do not let your anger burn against me. Let me speak one more time. Let me, please, make trial with the fleece just once more. Let it be dry only on the fleece, and on all the ground let there be dew." And God did so that night. It was dry on the fleece only, and on all the ground there was dew. Chapter 7. Then Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and all the troops that were with him rose early and encamped beside the spring of Harod. And the camp of Midian was north of them, below the hill of Moreh in the valley. The Lord said to Gideon, "The troops with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hand. Israel would only take the credit away from me, saying, 'My own hand has delivered me.' Now therefore proclaim this in the hearing of the troops: whoever is fearful and trembling, let him return home." Thus Gideon sifted them out. 22,000 returned, and 10,000 remained. Then the Lord said to Gideon, "The troops are still too many. Take them down to the water, and I will sift them out for you there. When I say, 'This one shall go with you,' he shall go with you. And when I say, 'This one shall not go with you,' he shall not go." So he brought the troops down to the water, and the Lord said to Gideon, "All those who lap the water with their tongues, as a dog laps, you shall put to one side. And all those who kneel down to drink, putting their hands to their mouths, you shall put to the other side." The number of those that lapped was 300, but all the rest of the troops knelt down to drink water. Then the Lord said to Gideon, "With the 300 that lapped, I will deliver you, and give the Midianites into your hand. Let all the others go to their homes." So he took the jars of the troops from their hands and their trumpets, and sent all the rest of Israel back to their own tents, but retained the 300. The camp of Midian was below him in the valley. Okay, so just to summarize, the people who lapped up the water with their tongues, as a dog laps, got the seal of approval from God. Something to keep in mind next time I take a sip. Verse 9, that same night the Lord said to him, get up. Before I go on, let me just double check. The lappers succeeded. Yeah, the 300 that lapped. Okay. All right. I would not have guessed the lapping. Anyway, verse 9, that same night the Lord said to him, get up, attack the camp, for I have given it into your hand. But if you fear to attack, go down to the camp with your servant Purah, and you shall hear what they say, and afterwards your hands shall be strengthened to attack the camp. Then he went down with his servant Purah to the outposts of the armed men that were in the camp. The Midianites and Amalekites and all the people of the east lay along the valley as thick as locusts, and their camels were without number, countless as the sand on the seashore. When Gideon arrived, there was a man telling a dream to his comrade, and he said, I had a dream, and in it a cake of barley bread tumbled into the camp of Midian and came to the tent and struck it so that it fell. It turned upside down, and the tent collapsed. And the comrade answered, this is no other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash, a man of Israel. Into his hand God has given Midian and all the army. When Gideon heard the telling of the dream and its interpretation, he worshipped, and he returned to the camp of Israel and said, get up, for the Lord has given the army of Midian into your hand. After he divided the 300 men into 3 companies and put trumpets into the hands of all of them, and empty jars with torches inside the jars, he said to them, look at me and do the same. When I come to the outskirts of the camp, do as I do. When I blow the trumpet, I and all who are with me, then you also blow the trumpets around the whole camp and shout for the Lord and for Gideon. So Gideon and the 100 who were with him came to the outskirts of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch, and they had just set the watch. And they blew the trumpets and smashed the jars that were in their hands. So the 3 companies blew the trumpets and broke the jars, holding in their left hands the torches, and in their right hands the trumpets to blow. And they cried, a sword for the Lord and for Gideon. Every man stood in his place all around the camp, and all the men in camp ran. Let me read that again. Every man stood in his place all around the camp, and all the men in the camp ran. They cried out and fled. When they blew the 300 trumpets, the Lord set every man's sword against his fellow and against all the army. And the army fled as far as Beth-shittah toward Zerah, as far as the border of Abel-Meholah by Tabbath. And the men of Israel were called out from Naphtali and from Asher and from all of Manasseh, and they pursued after the Midianites. Verse 24, then Gideon sent messengers through all the hill country of Ephraim, saying, come down against the Midianites and seize the waters against them, as far as Beth-barah and also the Jordan. So all the men of Ephraim were called out, and they seized the waters as far as Beth-barah and also the Jordan. They captured the 2 captains of Midian, Oreb and Zeb. They killed Oreb at the rock of Oreb, and Zeb they killed at the winepress of Zeb, as they pursued the Midianites. They brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon beyond the Jordan. Chapter 8. Then the Ephraimites said to him, what have you done to us not to call us when you went to fight against the Midianites? And they upbraided him violently. So he said to them, what have I done now in comparison with you? Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer? God has given into your hands the captains of Midian, Oreb and Zeb. What have I been able to do in comparison with you? Then he said this, their anger against him subsided. Then Gideon came to the Jordan and crossed over, he and the 300 who were with him, exhausted and famished. So he said to the people of Succoth, please give us some loaves of bread to my followers, for they are exhausted, and I am pursuing Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian. But the officials of Succoth said, do you already have in your possession the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna, that we should give bread to your army? Gideon replied, well then, When the Lord has given Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, I will trample your flesh on the thorns of the wilderness and on briars. From there he went up to Penuel and made the same request of them, and the people of Penuel answered him, as the people of Succoth answered him. So he said to the people of Penuel, when I come back victorious, I will break down this tower. Verse 10, Now Zebah and Zalmunna were in Karkor with their army, about 15,000 men. All who were left of all the army of the people of the east, for 120,000 men bearing arms had fallen. So Gideon went up by a caravan route east of Nobah and Jogbehah and attacked the army, for the army was off its guard. Zebah and Zalmunna fled, and he pursued them and took the 2 kings of Midian, Zebah and Zalmunna, and threw all the army into a panic. When Gideon son of Joash returned from the battle by the ascent of Heres, he caught a young man, one of the people of Succoth, and questioned him, and he listed for him the officials and elders of Succoth, 27 people. Then he came to the people of Succoth and said, Here are Zebah and Zalmunna, about whom you taunted me, saying, Do you already have in possession the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna, that we should give bread to your troops who are exhausted? So he took the elders of the city and took thorns of the wilderness and briars, and with them he trampled the people of Succoth. He also broke down the tower of Penuel and killed the men of the city. My goodness, Gideon. Then he said to Zebah and Zalmunna, What about the men whom you killed at Tabor? They answered, As you are, so were they, every one of them. They resembled the sons of a king. And he replied, They were my brothers, the sons of my mother. As the Lord lives, if you had saved them alive, I would not kill you. So he said to Jether, his firstborn, Go kill them. But the boy did not draw his sword, for he was afraid, because he was still a boy. Then Zebah and Zalmunna said, You come and kill us, for as the man is, so is his strength. So Gideon proceeded to kill Zebah and Zalmunna, and he took the crescents that were on the necks of the camels. Okay. Verse 22. Then the Israelites said to Gideon, Rule over us, you and your son and your grandson also, for you have delivered us out of the hand of Midian. Gideon said to them, I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. Then Gideon said to them, Let me make a request of you. Each of you give me an earring he has taken as booty. For the enemy had golden earrings because they were Ishmaelites. We will willingly give them, they answered. So they spread a garment, and each threw into it an earring he had taken as booty. The weight of the golden earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, apart from the crescents and the pendants and the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian and the collars that were on the necks of their camels. Gideon made an ephod out of it and put it in his town in Ophrah. And all Israel prostituted themselves to it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and to his family. So Midian was subdued before the Israelites, and they lifted up their heads no more. So the land had rest 40 years in the days of Gideon. What did they do? Gideon made an ephod out of it and put it in his town. Okay. Jerubbaal, son of Joash, went to live in his own house. Now Gideon had 70 sons. 70 sons, his own offspring, for he had many wives. Got it. His concubine, who was in Shechem, also bore him a son, and he named him Abimelech. Then Gideon, son of Joash, died at a good old age, and was buried in the tomb of his father Joash at Ophrah of the Abiezrites. As soon as Gideon died, the Israelites relapsed and prostituted themselves with the Baals, making Baal-berith their god. The Israelites did not remember the Lord their God, who had rescued them from the hand of all their enemies on every side, and they did not exhibit loyalty to the house of Jerubbaal, that is, Gideon, in return for all the good that he had done to Israel. And that's the sad conclusion to this reading. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you're doing well. See you next time.